All right, hello and welcome back to the Futurism at JG podcast. My name's Nicholas, I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Ju-Young. So Ju-Young, could you introduce who you are?
Hi everyone, my name is Ju-Young. You can call me Eric. I'm a freshman majoring in computer science on the pre-med track at Hopkins.
So that's a pretty unique combo, Eric. I don't think, I've been a lot of pre-meds. Obviously Hopkins is very pre-med heavy, probably like 50% of students are pre-med.
Yeah.
I myself came in actually as pre-med and have since kind of transitioned to more research path because I just enjoy research more, and I think it's where I can have a bigger societal impact. But yeah, I'd love to hear how you became interested in both computer science and pre-med, because that's a very cool combo.
Well, so at first I was AMS major when it came in here, but then I switched to CS because I'm mostly interested in the intersection of like AI, machine learning, and healthcare. So basically, like wearable devices, like using big data to solve and like provide better diagnosis, like that kind of stuff. So, and also I'm also interested in entrepreneurship as well. So and startups. So I thought having those CS skills will help me a lot in my career. So I'm doing both right now.
That might be the most marketable combination of skills I've ever heard. Computer science, medicine, and entrepreneurship. I mean, that's incredible, man.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about an E&M minor?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship management? Okay. Yeah, I'm doing that minor. Ricardo's doing it too.
Oh, really? Nice.
Really cool minor. I feel like, for all of you listening out there, highly recommend the CLE, who actually sponsors this podcast, the Center for Leadership Education. They have an incredible program. They're kind of like a hidden gem of Hopkins. They have all these really cool minors: entrepreneurship management, accounting, leadership, marketing. So some really, really cool, like, practical classes. And for all the minors, you have to take business, accounting, and then either writing or public speaking. That's called professional writing and communication, or oral presentations. So I did oral presentations, which was awesome. Had Professor Smith, who was a great professor. And so, yeah, I mean, the professors in the department are fantastic. I mean, these are like, the big leaders in their fields. They have lots of connections. My professors have been extremely helpful in, like my job search and like thinking about careers, connecting me with the right people, even like getting this club podcast up and going. So yeah, for you people out there, like really, you should really consider doing one of the minors. I think E&M might be my favorite one because of the flexibility and all the different courses you can take. Currently taking managerial finance with Professor Priolo. Really cool class. You learn all about Excel, financial analysis, stuff like that. So yeah, if you have any questions about the minor, you included Eric. Happy to answer.
Well, I'm thinking of doing minor in also computer integrated surgery, which is like.
Oh my gosh, that exists?
Yeah, it's a minor.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like
that is cool.
Using like computer vision, like medical data analysis, image analysis.
That's really interesting.
Like that's like what I'm really interested in.
You know the kind of like, what is it called? The machine that like did surgery on a grave.
Da Vinci machine.
The Da Vinci machine.
Started
yeah.
Here.
Yeah. Have you like seen that? And like it's like Hackman Hall, I think.
Oh no.
Or something? No, you haven't seen that? Is that like kind of what you kind of like stuff like that is what you're interested in? Okay. Yeah. And I know you mentioned diagnostics, which is also something I'm really passionate about, because I feel like, there's like the saying, which is also why I'm interested in research, but there's a saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think that's really true, because if you can prevent, a disease or, situation from happening in the first place, that's a million times better than trying to treat it. And, obviously for the healthcare system and for biotech companies and pharma companies, it's not profitable, right? Like if people aren't getting sick, that puts them out of business, right? So they actually have a vested interest in, which is kind of sad, but they do have a vested interest in people being sick and wanting to buy their, services and drugs and stuff like that. So that's, that is conflicting, because, I am thinking about going into biotech, but I also have that in the back of my mind, like, we are a capitalist society, and like, these companies are trying to make a, bang for their buck. And, it's really interesting research that they're doing, but they're also trying to make a lot of money off consumers and ripping them off. So yeah, but research for me, which is why I kind of shifted over to the research and not medicine as much, is like medicine, maybe if you're like a family doctor or something, you can see maybe, a few hundred families or a few hundred people, in like a year. But if you're in research, you could find a drug that could potentially save millions of people. So I kind of look at it like that, where it's the more intimate, you're more like, you're having like closer relations with your patient, and like you see that impact directly, and you're obviously giving more personalized care. But then with research, even though maybe it's more of a long shot, you have that much bigger potential to like impact the world. Plus you're also moving medicine forward, right? Because medicine uses a lot of, what research kind of brings forth. So yeah, have you like thought about that at all? Like would you ever want to think about research? I know as pre-med, you probably will have to do some research. I don't know if you're thinking about that yet. But yeah, have you thought about that? Like research versus pre-med?
Research, but that also aligns with why I'm doing computer science as well, because you said research, but like developing a software that can help like diagnose like lung cancer, for example, with AI, that can help like millions of people. Instead of, if I become a physician, I can help maybe like total about like 10,000 people until I die. But then if I develop a software, that's like a much bigger impact. So I think that also aligns with my interests as well.
So I'm very curious. What classes are you taking this
right
semester?
Right now I'm taking. Well, I don't have that much experience in computer science yet.
Okay.
So I'm taking like intro courses. So Gateway Java. Intro Chem Physics 1.
Oh, you're Physics 1 too?
Yeah.
Oh, but probably for engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm taking for bio. So.
Oh yeah, I heard that was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
I mean, I think it's about as hard as engineering. Mm-hmm. Actually, engineering might be a little bit harder than for bio, from what I've heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard, but I think it's similar.
How are you finding physics so far?
I did good on the first midterm. I did bad on the second.
Oh, same.
So I had to do well on the third one.
No, that's literally me.
Yeah.
Literally me.
But the grades came out yesterday, right?
I think we're maybe slightly ahead of you.
Yeah,
maybe. Ours came out like a week ago, I think. But I think we're covering roughly the same, material. But yeah, physics is one of those things because I'm more, neuroscience. I'm more interested in biology, and kind of looking at courses for next semester, because neuroscience is also one of those majors that has some really cool, interesting classes. Like I've taken neuroeconomics with Dr. Tragesser. That was a really interesting class. Kind of looks at decision making, how we kind of make, it's kind of a mix of how we make economic decisions, but then also showing that humans aren't as rational. So there's a huge emotional component to the decisions we make. So that was really interesting. Took a neuroanatomy course, functional human neuroanatomy, with Professor Courtney. Great class as well. Currently taking diseases and disorders of the nervous system with Dr. Smith and Dr. Baraban. Also fantastic class. And then next semester I have like 3 or 4 different classes. There's like a class on aging, a class on drug discovery, class on learning and memory. It's like so many interesting classes in neuroscience. And obviously maybe they're kind of only open to neuro majors because you have that prereqs and stuff. But it's been really cool to like get that more like research and neuroscience centered course schedule, but also have a course schedule that has a lot of the entrepreneurship and management stuff. So yeah, I think that's where the future is really, is like being able to be interdisciplinary, right? Like you are going to be very interdisciplinary, which is awesome. And so I think like combining different fields and not just specializing in one thing, but kind of being an ace of multiple different things is super valuable and super marketable, and more helpful to our society too, I think.
Yeah, I think Hopkins really focused on like interdisciplinary fields as well. Like I was able to like see so many people who are doing research in both fields, like for example CS and AI, or like neuroscience and CS, like that kind of stuff. So yeah.
So I'm very curious. I think we should go down the diagnostics route because I think we're both interested in that. Have you been like following or keeping up with any like recent developments in diagnostics, like anything recent that's been interesting?
Diagnosis, like what kind of diagnosis?
I don't know. I have a family friend who works at a company that does like cancer diagnostics. Like, is that something you're interested in at all? Like, looking at, I don't know, like blood samples and stuff, and trying to do like early detection for cancer. Is that something related?
Yeah, I know. Well, I read a book called it's called like The Future of Medicine, like digital healthcare. So basically, like there's this one company that reads mammography and like lung cancer images, and then they can figure out and early detect lung cancer with a very high precision rate. So I was really interested in how they can use the medical images to actually provide and assist doctors when they diagnose.
I think that's a really interesting thing, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of human error in medicine, and I feel like AI can fill those gaps that humans just plain out miss because we're human, right? Whereas AI is going to have a much less room for error if you like properly train it.
I didn't know about the blood sample.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, but they are using like blood samples to kind of detect for early signs of cancer. Like I'm sure there's like kind of like chemical markers and stuff that kind of point towards cancer or not. But yeah, I think like with things like cancer, it's so critical, like the early detection, right? Because the earlier you catch it, the better off you are, or the higher chance of survival. Like just in this, pandemic, I've had like several family members pass away and family friends pass away from cancer. And it's like a really, really, or it's becoming a lot more common. And it's really, really, harmful, or not harmful, but it hurts families and it hurts our society a lot. So I think, early detection, being able to diagnose it earlier, is going to be a lot more fruitful than trying to treat it, once it's already progressed, stage 3, stage 4. I mean, at that point, it's kind of you're fighting a losing battle. So, yeah, I think, now I've said it like 3 times, but diagnosis and early detection is so critical. I remember watching a video on Bill Gates, or by Bill Gates. He was basically proposing this kind of like, how we do like COVID tests and stuff. He was proposing this kind of universal testing where you would take like a test, I don't remember if it was like every week or every month, but you basically do a test and then scientists can like test your saliva or blood or whatever, or maybe you give multiple samples. They test it for like everything, essentially. They test for cancer, they test for COVID, they test for flu, they test for all sorts of diseases and stuff. And like that is kind of interesting to me. I don't know if you could see that being a thing where it's just like, oh, you just once a month, or I don't know, every couple months you just like go in and get like tested for everything, or maybe even using like genetic markers, looking at like, well, I guess that wouldn't be every month, but also using genetics to look at maybe predispositions, and like based on that then tracking more closely, like, oh, you have a higher disposition for, I don't know, breast cancer or something, right? Or you have a family history of breast cancer, then we'll more closely track that. So that would be interesting to have like very personalized tracking and like more frequent tracking, especially for cancer. I don't know, what do you think about Bill Gates' idea?
Well, Bill Gates, I never heard of it. I think it's a good idea, but like in reality, it's like pretty hard to actually collect data, like actual data, like saliva, like blood, from all people around the world in one place, and then that like provide analysis. So I think like really similar to that is there's technologies being developed using IoT, like Internet of Things. So like sensors, like for example, they will put sensors in on your toilet, and then they will like analyze your samples, like urine joint samples, and that kind of stuff. Or like on your bed, basically to track your sleep, monitor your sleep, and also not only that, but Apple Watches and Fitbit. That's also a big thing, and they can provide like daily checks of your health, basically. And if that can be expanded to more areas, not only on like blood rate, heart rate right now, but it can be expanded to more, a lot more diseases that can be detected earlier, maybe cancer.
Yeah, I used to have I still have it, but I haven't been wearing it. Fitbit. Absolutely love it. I think it's so cool that you can like measure, obviously heart rate, pretty common. But you can also measure like oxygen saturation at night and like your sleep levels and how much REM sleep and how much deep sleep you had. I think that's really cool. There's also this ring. It's called the Oura ring.
Yeah.
I think they had like a whole thing where they got like all the NBA players Oura rings, I think, to like track their stats and vitals and stuff. So I think stuff like that, like the smaller and smaller it gets, the more portable it is, the better. And it'd be really interesting. Like, I remember there was this really cool thing that I'd seen somewhere that was like you tattoo on like basically you like get like a tattoo of like a tech. It's like an adhesive kind of. It's like putting a Band-Aid on yourself, but it's like it's able to like measure like vitals and stuff, and because it's so like close to your skin, it can get more data. So I thought that was really interesting. Like maybe having surface level or even like maybe slightly under surface. I don't know how invasive people are willing to get. I don't know if I'd be willing to do that, but that could be interesting if we can create tech that's able to provide even more data if possible.
Yeah, I definitely think that wearable devices is like the very most like powerful devices to provide early diagnosis. Like for example, for like people who wear glasses, like they can have sensors on here, or I know like there are some wearable devices on belts as well, and also in their socks, outside their socks or below their feet on their shoes, but I'm like what I'm worried about is like the future of wearable devices is really bright, but I don't think not many people use it that much because it is number one expensive, and number two you have to charge it. So like for example Fitbit, I used to have it as well, but then I always forget to charge it. But then I have no like difficulties living my life without Fitbit. So that's why probably like Apple Watch is the most like successful wearable device I think out there.
But Apple Watch you still have to charge, right?
Yeah.
Is it just better battery?
Yes, but
okay.
It provides us a lot more things like outside of health.
Oh,
well.
I see. Like it's an actual smartwatch. You can get messages and take calls and stuff. I think that's that's really cool.
So I think like for a wearable device to be actually successful, it should provide more than just tracking your health. It should be like provide maybe you're like low on like sugar levels, take something like maybe like advise you or something. Like it'll be more beyond that than just your sleep was good yesterday or your heart rate is normal. Like not people really benefit from that, right, in their daily lives.
Almost like live coaching, like having a doctor in your pocket, almost like telling you like the best thing to do. That's really interesting. When you mentioned the glasses, that totally reminded me of Google Glass, which is like, I don't know whatever happened to Google Glass, to be honest. Same thing with like Google VR, like really cool ideas, but I guess the execution just didn't work out. But it reminded me of like VR and AR and like those technology, like we've had episodes on VR and AR. We've talked about them before. But I feel like those have huge applications in medicine too. Like, could you see, I remember reading an article about how they were trying to train medical students to, like in med school, you have to like cut open a cadaver, I guess. They were training medical students, instead of using an actual cadaver, using like a 3D, like doing it like VR or AR and like dissecting it through there. Is that something that you could see kind of, or maybe even other applications of that in medicine? Like,
I think I saw something on YouTube as like a simulator for surgery. So like medical students or doctors can actually practice surgery using their 3D like VR AR machines.
Oh yes,
and also I recently saw there's a startup founded by a JHU student called Quest to Learn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like a VR AR that can do lab techniques, like do chem labs.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it was so cool. Yes. I think it is really applicable and it's really useful.
Yeah, it's with China. Yeah. He also has a podcast called Hopkins Hacks. We're doing a collab with them actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So he's like a really cool person. Like he's doing a lot of cool stuff, which is awesome. But yeah, the Quest to Learn thing is really cool because like I took bio lab and chem lab online, and like I was literally a chem lab TA last semester. If any of my chem lab students are watching this, like you know, like I struggled because it's so different, right? Doing the lab online versus doing it in person. Right. I was the only chem lab TA. I was also the only underclassman chem lab TA. Like there was no one else in my grade or below. It was like all juniors, seniors, graduate students. So like I also had that disadvantage, but it's so different, and like you just don't get like the physical sense of like being in a lab, being able to, you know, do this procedure or like measure that, like actually using your hands. Like maybe you see it on a video, but it's so much different actually doing it yourself. So I think things like Quest to Learn and using like AR and VR, like if I'd been able to use like Quest to Learn or something, or like do an AR and at least have somewhat of a physical or like visual immersion into the lab, I think that would have prepared me a lot better to be a chem lab TA. I was essentially learning chem lab from scratch in a sense, because it was my first time actually in the lab. It was my first time actually seeing the experiments. And so I kind of struggled along with the students, and I did my best, but like it's so different. And I think tools like Quest to Learn could be really, really valuable. Same thing for Biolab, right? Like I think when I took it in, Biolab 1 was fully virtual. In the spring, you had the choice to be, I think we had the choice either to go on campus or stay home. I decided to stay home. But we had like 2 of us were virtual in my group and 1 was in person. So the in-person person was, or the in-person group member was doing all the stuff in person. And then we were just kind of watching them and like supporting with like online data analysis and writing out everything while they were kind of our hands in the lab. But it would have been really interesting if you could have some kind of AR component. Maybe this is looking really in the future, but what if you could like VR yourself into a physical space? So like let's say, you know, you're in like Europe or something, and then another person is in I don't know, or, you know, Baltimore or whatever, and then you can have like the person in Europe kind of like zoom in, essentially not zoom in, but like enter the room in like VR. So like almost like maybe I'm getting into like holograms. Like what if you could have like a hologram there where like you're there in person and like the other person's there physically and they can see you, you can see them, and then you can actually like see what's going on. I think that could be really interesting. Yeah, that's really kind of like Star Wars-esque, you know, with like the holograms, but then like actually having it be like a physically immersive experience. And maybe even, now I'm just going on a tangent, sorry, but what if you could even, like let's say right now I'm a hologram, right? You're the person in person and I'm the hologram. Like what if we can make it so immersive that I look 100% real to you and you look 100%, well, you are real. And then like we have like haptic feedback and everything. So it's like it feels real. So like I'm a hologram and I touch this and I'm like, oh, I can actually feel it. Like what if we could simulate the physics and like actual like physical touch of everything? Like I'm a hologram right now and I'm actually feeling this table, and like everything you're seeing, it looks like I'm actually touching the table and everything, and like obeying, like the hologram doesn't let me pass through this table, like it actually like stops me. That would be really interesting, like simulating 100% like to a T the physics of the real world, and like being able to, maybe that's getting into like the metaverse too. But
yeah, that's definitely,
that was a whole tangent.
Well, like if that is possible, then like we don't even need Zoom anymore.
I mean, it'd be way better than Zoom.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you could literally be sitting in class from, I don't know, England, sitting in class at Hopkins in England, and like you're there in the classroom and you're seeing what's on the board, and like you're sitting next to your classmate and you can actually like have like side conversations with them.
You don't need like to travel, like go on the plane and travel for a business trip.
Yeah.
You can just like go on that platform. I think Facebook is trying to do that right now. Meta.
Are they? Yeah.
Yeah, with Horizons.
Huh.
Yeah.
How's that gonna work? Like what's their kind of plan?
They haven't revealed a lot with do you know their AR VR device is called, I think,
I know Quest.
Yeah,
is their
Quest.
VR. Yeah.
Yeah, Quest.
I was just testing it out the other day actually. It's pretty cool.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, yeah. I think they're still working on it more.
Yeah.
And then but it's like 10 to 20 years ahead, like in the future.
I think kind of taking it back to medicine, because I know you're mentioning surgery. I think that could also be a really interesting thing. Like, let's say someone has to have like a life-saving brain surgery, for example, and they want, this family like wants the best neurosurgeon possible, but the best neurosurgeon is in, I don't know, India or like Brazil or something, and they're like in Spain, right? What if you could have like a robotic arm, like the Da Vinci machine or something, but it's controlled in VR or like kind of virtually? Obviously, that gets into the issue of like you need to have a really strong connection and like make sure you don't lose a connection, or like that could go south really quick. But what if you could have this neurosurgeon from Brazil like zoom in to Spain and like be able to like physically do the surgery but virtually? Like that could be really interesting, because that way you're essentially bringing in, the best doctors from around the world without them having to travel. So you're bringing the best care to patients. I think that could be a really interesting thing. I know that's something you said. They're already testing that, right? Like seeing if you could do surgery not only virtually, but seeing if you could like actually control a machine virtually.
I think they already have the technology to like connect doctors like all abroad while they're doing surgery.
Yeah.
But the doctor abroad can't control it yet, I think.
Oh,
they
so we're
can
getting
probably
into
just maybe advise them or just look like supervise it maybe, but I don't think they have the technology right now to actually control it abroad, like using VR and AR.
I feel like we could make that happen.
Yeah.
Like being able to control it virtually. Like I feel like that seems like a reasonable thing that we'd be able to do.
That's why I'm also trying to do the computer integrated
thing.
No,
that's so cool.
Classes in it. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Also more in the VR and medicine, I think like the Korean War and Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And people like suffer from PTSD.
Yeah.
I know there's a VR software called Virtual Vietnam. So it's basically you try to cure PTSD in Vietnam war veterans, and you put them in the VR situation where they will be exposed to the actual combat simulations of Vietnam. So like actually I heard PTSD can be cured from like repeated exposure to that actual events.
Interesting.
So by repeatedly putting them in this situation, they can actually be cured. So that's in the realm of digital therapeutics, but it's a really relatively really new field that has to be more researched. So like there are some research papers that support that there's actually clinical evidence that the PTSD has been cured, but some research papers don't support it. So like if someone actually makes, like for example, virtual Vietnam or virtual Korea, it'll be pretty hard to actually get FDA approval to actually put it out in the market. So I think that's a big hurdle, like the FDA regulations, and actually, since it is this medicine and it's dealing with people's lives and health, it's pretty hard, it's pretty conservative to actually get past that hurdle of regulations. Yeah. So, and also insurance, because not many insurance companies will include that in their insurance. So I think that's a big hurdle.
Yeah. That also reminded me of just like digital therapeutics in general. I feel like there's been a huge uptake, and like one thing that comes to mind is like BetterHelp. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
It's like basically you can, well, I haven't tried BetterHelp, so I don't know exactly how it works, but from what I understand is like you can basically sign up. I think it's like an app, or I think you can probably do it online too. You basically sign up to do like online therapy essentially. So I think you can like Zoom in essentially with like therapists, or you can like text with them, like whatever you're comfortable with essentially. So I feel like that's another interesting kind of field, is like digital therapy, like kind of moving from, I can't tell if like the world wants to be moving in a more virtual direction, or if we want to shift back to more in person. Like I feel like we're kind of in this weird transition period where we're kind of coming out of a pandemic, at least in the US, where we're kind of coming out of pandemic a little bit, but then it's also like people can't decide if they like in person or virtual better. Like even I'm like I still can't decide if I like in person or virtual better, because they both have their pros and cons. Like virtual is so convenient, but then in person it's like I just learn better in person,
right?
And like being able to have, you know, one-on-one conversations. But then I also am like, it was so nice to be, you know, at home with my family, like being able to Zoom and like go play outside, hang out with my family. So it's really interesting. Like I'm just thinking about like where the world is gonna head, because I think we're really at this crossroads right now, where maybe we want to go hybrid, like even like work, where it's like, do we want people to be in the office, or can they do the work just as well from home? And there's a whole issue around like privacy, like employers trying to like track their employees, you know, when they're not in the office, and like productivity issues, like maybe they're less productive at home or they're more productive at home. I think there's still some research to be done, but it'll be really interesting to see, like, are we going to try to move fully virtual? Are we going to try to move fully back in person? Are we going to try to do like a hybrid, kind of mix the two? So I think the pandemic has kind of accelerated things that would not have happened for at least another few years.
Because like
so,
people,
for better or worse,
before the pandemic, like companies would have thought, oh, if we have like people work from home, then productivity will drastically decrease.
Yeah.
But after they tried it, because of COVID, they realized, oh, it's not that bad, and employers really like it.
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna be more hybrid, like moving toward hybrid in the future, because people, like for example, if we plan like events at Hopkins, if someone plans an event, if it's on Zoom, there's like so many more participants than in person.
Yeah.
But in-person events can like be more engaging, like can be more of a learning experience.
Yeah.
So I think people both want like both components. So I think hybrid is more of a like a future in that.
I think so. Yeah, I think so too. I think it also depends on like where the tech goes, like with Quest, like with Meta, and all these VR headsets. If we can make it's really an adoption thing, where like if we can make the tech, I'm thinking of like, I don't know if you watched Ready Player One, the movie.
Yeah, I watched.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite movies. I've referenced it so much. It's also like very similar to the book Otherworld. I mean, Ready Player One's also a book, but Otherworld, both very similar premises, where you're basically able to like simulate reality. Like your body is like 100% convinced that you're in the real world when you're actually in a virtual world. So if we can get technology to that point, I'm really curious to see if people will be like, oh yeah, screw reality. Like I can do whatever I want in a virtual world and it feels 100% real to me. Like I'm fully immersed. I can smell, I can taste, I can hear. So I'm really curious to see like if we can get technology to that point where you can no longer distinguish VR from reality. I mean, just purely visually, like I was watching this video of like a video game versus like reality, and I was like, wow, that's like very hard to distinguish. So like we're getting there, at least visually, but it will be a matter of like doing the haptic stuff, like having the touch and like the smells, that's going to be hard to do. I don't know how you're going to simulate smell. So that'll be something, that'll be a big challenge for VR. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. But there's such huge applications for VR, for AR, you know, in medicine and beyond. And also AI, right? AI is a huge potential. Machine learning as well. So yeah, I'm really happy you're doing the combo. That's really cool. Yeah.
I also know like an app. It's a phone app, but like on like for example iPhone, you can know if you're depressed or not by like if it's an app and you have to download it on your app, and then it will just basically track your like touches, how many you stare at the screen, how long you stare at the screen, how many touches you do it, and then they will like analyze you, and then they will feel like they will know if you're like depressed, and then have signs of actual depression, like falling into depression. So it's like a really new field, but it has to be more research, definitely. But like in that kind of, it's really cool, but I don't think people will actually want that, because like it has privacy issues.
That's a huge privacy issue.
People won't like for their all their things tracked.
Yeah.
So that's a big hurdle for that as well.
That's a whole nother thing. Is like the privacy issue with all these technologies. It's like you're giving up more and more and more of your privacy, potentially for a greater good. Like if you could detect depression or stuff like that, that could be really interesting. I'd never heard of that. I'm actually now a little skeptical of that, because how would you tell if someone is depressed from like screen time?
Not like, screen time, but like how like their touches on the screen, and maybe like for example, if you go on maybe Instagram, if you're not depressed, you will usually do something, but if you're more depressed, you'll maybe touch on something first, and then go into like DMs first, or maybe I don't know the technology beyond it, but I know it exists.
And they've like proven this. They've shown like this correlates with like levels of depression.
Yeah, that's the hurdle they have to pass, because there are some research supporting it, but there's some research that it has nothing to do with it.
So, okay, so it's still kind of a budding thing. Yeah. Okay, I'm curious to see where that goes. That's really interesting. Have you tried the?
No.
Is it like an actual app you can download right now?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's whole another thing, is like being able to detect things like depression, anxiety, ADHD. There may be kind of unconventional methods. Like that's a very unconventional method.
Oh, also talking about ADHD, I know some digital therapeutics that use games to cure ADHD.
Oh.
So like basically it's like a car racing game, but it will have like certain features that will cure ADHD. Like for children, or like for patients. So
interesting.
Like, that's not the only cure to ADHD, but I heard some doctors can like prescribe it, like maybe as like a assistance.
Wow.
To ADHD.
That is really interesting.
I forgot the name of it, but I know it exists.
Wow, you're blowing my mind right now. I'd never heard of this.
It's such a cool field.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm now my interest is very has grown now. Like I'm very curious to see where these technologies go. That's really, really cool. I've never heard that. I think games and just like unconventional methods, like thinking outside the box. Like who would have thought a game could help with like ADHD? I think games could be an interesting path to take too, on like looking at screen time and stuff. Literally just in my neuroscience class, we had a lecture on depression, or a guest speaker on depression, and he was talking about basically how there's this huge correlation between like smartphones and depression. Like it's just depression and like suicide and stuff have like skyrocketed as like smartphone use has skyrocketed. And it's like, obviously you can't prove causation, but it's such a strong correlation that you just suspect that there is some causation, at least some causation, if not like direct causation. So that's a whole nother thing. It's like, and that gets into medicine too. It's like, what is the impact that smartphones are having on our health, right? Because there's such a new technology, literally just the past maybe 10, 15 years. And like, they're so widely adopted, and we just don't know, well, we kind of do know, like the long-term effects that smartphones are having on our health, and just like connection. I think connection is a huge issue like today, and like loneliness, because social media gives this illusion of like being connected, where it's like it's very like superficial connection, right? So I feel like maybe that also gets into the being in person. When you're in person, you have a better chance of like having a real connection with someone. Like if we're doing this over Zoom, of course that's cool, but like actually being in person and like being able to interact, I think is very, very valuable, and like helps build like a stronger connection than like over Zoom. So I think that's another thing to think about, is like the connection aspect, and like, will this technology, if we adopt VR and stuff, is that just going to make us less and less connected? And the answer is it probably will make us less connected. So we'll have to kind of as a society think, is that the route we want to go? As cool as it is how is it going to impact our health? How is it going to impact our kind of social behavior and happiness levels and depression, anxiety, stuff like that? So yeah, really, really interesting things to think about.
I personally, well, I used to use Instagram a lot, but then I decided to delete it once.
Nice.
And then I deleted it for like maybe 3 or 4 months, and then I became so happy. To be honest, like
That's awesome.
For example, what you're doing with Instagram is like you're going on your phone to watch the most happiest moments of other people's lives while you're just doing your own thing. So like that, I don't know why, like people. Well, now I install it again, but yeah, I think social media has a lot to do with emotions, depressions. That based on my personal experience, but I can't delete it anymore because I have to like connect with like people since I'm abroad. So I have to like text friends back in Korea, back in home. Yeah, so I still need it, but I'm not that dependent on it anymore.
That's good.
So, yeah.
I used to be like that. Like I was never a social media person until pretty much college, actually. And yeah, I think I was a lot happier before social media. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. All of you listening out there, maybe consider taking a little, this whole thing around like dopamine, and like these like little dopamine hits that you get every time you're on social media. And they're really, really addictive, and like, they're almost addictive in like a like sadistic, like almost like an evil way. Like Apple and Instagram and Meta, like they're trying to get you to spend the maximum time on their platform, and they'll do whatever they can to keep your attention. And maybe that's also why we're having higher levels of ADHD and stuff, is because our attention spans are getting lower and lower and lower.
So they're actually hiring the most smartest people on the world to make you addicted to the
like these are the smartest people. They know how to hack your biology and your psychology. So I think for all of you out there, you should really consider maybe just try a few days off social media if you can. Just take a break and like see how you feel. Like do like a dopamine detox. There's a really cool video on YouTube. I forget what the channel is called, but it's called like dopamine detox. Maybe it's something I'll consider doing too. But could be really interesting to see if we can kind of maybe take a break from social media, or just kind of lower our use of it, and kind of see how that affects our health and our happiness and connections. So yeah, kind of a suggestion to all of you out there. Maybe go ahead and try it. And also, of course, like think about all the cool tech that Eric and I have kind of discussed. I think the future is really, really bright, really, really interesting. I think there's a lot of really cool applications for whether it's games, whether it's apps, whether it's AI, whether it's VR, AR. So many cool and helpful applications in diagnostics, in therapeutics, and in just making the world a better place. So on that note, this has been Futurism at JHU episode with Eric, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.